All right, some breaking news on this Saturday as the Philadelphia 76ers have made two moves in NBA free agency. Both moves we've talked about this past week right here on the show. This is Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase Sr. coming to you from Mayaca City, Florida, just outside of Sarasota. If you know where that is, let me know down in the comments section. Visiting my stepdad, him and my mom, back a few years ago, built a house here. So after the craziness of NBA free agency, decided to come down here for a little bit of a break, a little bit of relaxation and vacation, but 76ers just made two moves, and we got to talk about it right here on the show, and that's why you subscribe, because myself, producer Chip, we're here for Sixers fans regardless of where we are, and whenever breaking news happens, we talk about it right here on 76ers Now. So make sure you hit that sub button, whether we're at the studio, at home, in Florida. I was on a run, pulled out my phone, right place, right time, looked at it. Tweet notification from Woj, Sixers signing Caleb Martin, letting go of Paul Reed. I got to run back, finish out the 4-mile run streak at 429 days so that I can hop in front of the camera on this microphone and talk about these moves. So, Woj tweeting out here on Saturday morning that free agent forward Caleb Martin finalizing a deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. He continued by saying an impactful pickup for the Sixers, who bring on the playoff-tested veteran from Miami. And if you think about Caleb Martin, you think about a guy who can hit the three, who's had big moments in the playoffs, and is playoff tested, who comes from the Miami Heat culture. Sixers looking to get a little bit stronger mentally, and with this roster, they pick up another shooter who can defend. It's a really good move for the Sixers, and I'll explain some more thoughts on that coming up here just around the corner. There had to be a corresponding roster move pretty much that the Sixers had to make in order to sign Caleb Martin to a 4-year guaranteed deal for more than $32 million, just because of the financial constraints that they are in, having given out max contracts to Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, of course, on a max. And the Sixers going into this move had, give or take, about $11 million in cap space. So they have waived forward and center Paul Reed, whose contract was non-guaranteed for this year. It was a tick under $8 million. So you let go of Paul Reed, B-Ball Paul, no longer with this team, and we were talking about those possibilities all throughout the week here on the show, because it just made financial and roster sense, where you clear up just under $8 million, and now you're giving about an average annual value of $8 million to Caleb Martin, and Caleb Martin will pretty much take the spot and the roster spot of Paul Reed, who is a little bit of a tweener, as we know. He's a little bit too small to play the 5 consistently, and not good enough or skilled enough to play the 4, can't knock down the 3 at a consistent rate, and because of that, yes, he gives you length and athleticism and defense and effort. B-Ball Paul, out the mud, a fun story, especially a developmental story for a second-round pick who got better. I think that Glenn Rivers kind of hurt his confidence a little bit early in his career, but we saw certainly the potential that Paul Reed was able to have. But this is a move where you bring on a better player in Caleb Martin as compared to Paul Reed, and it just makes your basketball unit a little bit better. And I would imagine that the Sixers have their starting 5 now. Maybe they'll make a move for a traditional power forward, but I'm thinking it's going to be Tyrese Maxey at the 1, Kelly Oubre at the 2, Paul George or Caleb Martin at the 3, and then either George or Martin at the 4, with Joel Embiid playing the 5 spot. Now, Martin is 6'5", has some pretty good size, so the Sixers would be a little bit undersized at that 4 position. I think the thought here surrounding Joel Embiid with a lot more shooters, and the Sixers certainly able to accomplish that. Last year, he averaged 10 points for Miami. In a contract year, he shot 35% from 3 on 3.5 attempts in 27 minutes per night. I would imagine that the minutes go up, and he's going to get some better looks offensively because he's playing on a more talented team with Philadelphia as compared to Miami, which was a little bit thin as far as overall talent offensively on that team last year. And I think that this move for the Sixers is really looking ahead to the playoffs. Caleb Martin is very battle-tested. He's very mentally tough. He's had some monster games in the playoffs. He's consistently shown that he can perform and thrive when the pressure cooker is on. 28 years old. And as for that success in the NBA playoffs, a lot of it has come against the Boston Celtics. He's averaged 13.5 points per game on 50% shooting in the regular season and playoff games against the Celtics the last 2 years. And it's the most points per game that Martin has had against an Eastern Conference opponent. Philadelphia is a little bit mentally fickle against Boston, a team that's loaded at the wing spot, coming off an NBA championship, and now the Sixers have Paul George and Caleb Martin to help at least try to defend that wing position, in addition to Kelly Oubre, who can do that as well. Made a name for himself really 2 playoff sessions ago when he averaged 26 and 2 in the Heat's Eastern Conference Finals win over the Celtics. Hit a lot of big shots, has some good defensive sequences. He's had 4 playoff series where he's averaged over 10 points, despite averaging 8.5 points for his entire career. He is a career 36% shooter from 3, but going back to him being able to step up when it matters the most, he's a 40% three-point shooter in the NBA playoffs. So I do want to see where he fits into this lineup. If you're giving him a 4-year contract that's guaranteed, $32 million plus total, which is going to be in the neighborhood of $8 million per year, you would imagine that he's going to have an opportunity to start. That's a pretty expensive bench player there, even though the Sixers still have some moves to make in order to fortify that depth. But this certainly helps your overall roster talent and your overall depth. And if he does start, think about that starting lineup around Joel Embiid. This is the most talent that he's had around him in his NBA career, as he's about to turn 30 years old this year. And that's a problematic age for a center who's 7 feet, huge, and has had an injury history. If you look back at the center position, once you get past 30 years old, it can get a little bit risky as far as the health. But now you have Tyrese Maxey, who can score from all 3 levels. Kelly Oubre, who we know what he can do from what he did last year, really bought into the role that Nick Nurse levied upon him. You have Paul George, Caleb Martin, and Joel Embiid. That's a really good starting 5, if that is the starting 5. This probably takes the Sixers out of the Dorian Finney-Smith sweepstakes just because of the financial reasons here. You don't want to go into that second apron because it really prohibits you from making any moves, from the draft to trades to free agency signings. And you think about the shooters now that the Sixers have on this team, you know, Maxey, Paul George, Martin, but you also have Eric Gordon coming in off the bench, as well as Jared McCain. So the shooting prowess is there for the Sixers. I think all of them are really capable this year with the open looks that they'll get and with the complementary pieces around each of them to shoot 36, 37, 38+% from 3. You ideally would hope that a couple of those players are able to knock down about 40% of their three-point attempts. So you think about where the Sixers are offensively right now, they're in a good spot. You have shooting, you have playmaking, you have ball handling, you have size, you have length, you have athleticism, you have some wing players who are good, and those wing spots are important when you're going up against the likes of the Boston Celtics and now the New York Knicks, who at the point guard spot have Jalen Brunson, but they make the move for Mikal Bridges. They bring back OG Anunoby. I would imagine they'd try to move off of Julius Randle just because of the fit and the contract there, but New York and Boston are really good, and the Sixers here trying to maintain that level of competitiveness as being one of the top dogs in this entire conference. So good move here for the Sixers. I do like it. We talked about it all week, the possibilities of signing a Caleb Martin, either waiving or trading away Paul Reed. You know, he was a fun Sixer to root for, late second-round pick out of DePaul. He balled out in the G League. You know, he got almost $8 million on that contract last year. What's crazy is that if the Sixers would have made it to the second round, that Paul Reed contract would have been guaranteed Because the Sixers got bounced in the first round, it was a non-guaranteed contract, allowing the Sixers to make this move in waiving him to clear up just under $8 million and signing Caleb Martin, who is battle-tested, has played very well in some pressure cooker playoff games and series. He's thrived and flourished against the Boston Celtics at multiple points in the playoffs. He can defend, he can shoot the three, he can create a little bit, and he fits in nicely on this Philadelphia 76ers roster on this 4-year deal worth about $32+ million, according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. Make sure you hit that sub button. If the Sixers make more moves or another move, I'll be right back here. Going to be in Florida until Monday morning, then back in the studio on Monday, taking an early flight back to the Chat Sports studios. So we have you covered right here on the show. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Go Phillies. Go Sixers. Go Eagles. Peace.